Welcome to the show, everyone. Today we are exploring a narrative that honestly feels like it belongs in a high-concept sci-fi novel, but for the man who wrote it, it is a lived reality. We're talking about the life, or should I say, lives of Yahshao.
It really is a remarkable document, Sasha. It's rare to find someone who claims to have a continuous thread of memory that predates their own birth, stretching back centuries. It's what we call anamnesis, the recovery of knowledge from a previous existence.
Wait, let's back up a second. Alex, I've heard of people having past life flashes under hypnosis, but Yahshao is describing this as a coherent, chronological history. Is he actually saying he remembers being energy before he was even a person?
That's exactly where the story starts, Dan. Yahshao describes being with God, specifically mentioning the name Abraxas and being in a state of oneness with the all. He calls it the energy of all.
The mention of Abraxas is particularly striking. In Gnostic traditions, Abraxas is a deity that represents the totality of existence, often seen as a bridge between the divine and the physical world. It's a very sophisticated theological concept to appear in a personal memoir like this.
So he's starting at the very source. But why come down here? Why go from being one with the all to being, a human caught in the middle of a war?
He says it was a choice, or rather a mission. He mentions that a cry was heard from his heart in heaven and a meeting was held where he was chosen to be a witness, specifically a witness to the suffering of the Hmong family.
This is where the cultural context becomes so vital. The Hmong have a history of migration and persecution that spans centuries. Yahshao links his divine origin directly to the Hmong belief in Vamong, a messianic figure prophesied to save the people.
Okay, but if he's this divine witness, why does he start his journey as a king in 1743? That seems like a pretty comfortable place to start if you're trying to understand suffering, doesn't it?
Actually, Dan, he explains that he had to experience everything so he could learn to control his desires. He says he had to become a king to fulfill every want and need, essentially to get it out of his system so he wouldn't want anything on earth anymore.
It's a classic spiritual path, actually. Similar to the story of the Buddha, who was a prince before he sought enlightenment. You have to understand the height of worldly power to truly understand its emptiness.
1743. That's a very specific year. Alex, what was going on in Southeast Asia or the Hmong regions during that time? Does that date align with anything historical?
In the mid-18th century, the Hmong were largely in southern China, facing significant pressure from the Qing dynasty. There were massive uprisings and migrations. If he was a leader or king during that time, he would have been at the center of a total cultural upheaval.
Yahshao has this very vivid image of his death in that life. He describes looking out from inside his coffin, what he calls his new home made of stone, and watching them put the stone cover on. He says he died in 1743.
That is incredibly haunting. The idea of being conscious while being entombed. But then the story takes a turn for the biological. He says he reincarnated as a giant snake.
Yes, a giant snake in Laos. This might sound wild to a Western ear, but in Lao and Hmong folklore, the Naga or giant serpents are spiritual entities that inhabit the rivers. They are seen as guardians or omens.
He describes a conflict with humans in that form too. He says people were building big water pods to cover or trap the snakes, and he couldn't hide anymore. Eventually, his time was up.
Wait, water pods? Is he talking about dams or irrigation systems? If he's a giant snake living in the river, human infrastructure would literally be his undoing.
That's a brilliant connection, Dan. The development of the Mekong River and its tributaries throughout the 19th and 20th centuries has been a huge point of contention. It's fascinating that he frames it as a struggle between his form and human technology.
And then he says he crystallized. He turned into a giant stone snake by a river in Laos. He literally became part of the landscape. It's like he was waiting dormant for the next phase of his mission.
So he goes from energy to king to snake to stone. And then he comes back in 1960. Why then? What was so special about 1960 for the Hmong people?
1960 was the beginning of the secret war in Laos. The CIA began recruiting Hmong soldiers to fight against the communist Pathet Lao. It was the start of a period of unimaginable violence and displacement for the Hmong.
Yahshao says he came back purely as a witness. He didn't kill or hurt anyone. He was there to tell the people that they would move to America soon. He specifically mentions the Eagle plane coming to take them to the other world.
The Eagle plane. That has to be the American transport planes, right? For a people living in remote mountains, those planes must have looked like divine creatures or omens.
Absolutely. The Hmong word for America often translates as the other side or the new world. The prophecy of the Eagle plane is a well-documented part of Hmong oral history from that era. It's the moment their world changed forever.
But it wasn't a happy ending. Yahshao mentions having friends with him who were killed by Laos communist and Vietnamese soldiers. He was witnessing the destruction of his community firsthand.
It's heavy stuff, honestly. He's carrying the trauma of an entire generation, but he's viewing it through this lens of eternal recurrence. Does he say what happened after the 1960s?
He says he came back again in 1976. This is what he calls the last chapter. He's here now, in the present, and he mentions being in Thailand at the Ban Vinai camp.
Ban Vinai was one of the largest Hmong refugee camps in Thailand after the war. It was a place of limbo, where thousands of people waited for years to be resettled. It was a place of great suffering, but also of intense cultural preservation.
But he also mentions something a bit more ominous. He says he is here to judge whoever disrespects Yahshao. That's a big shift from being a passive witness, isn't it?
It is. It's like the witness has finally seen enough and is now stepping into a role of authority. He says the story can't be spoken about, yet here he is, sharing it through these images in his mind.
I think we need to look at the psychology of that. When a person or a culture has been through as much as the Hmong, the idea of a final judgment, or a witness who finally speaks the truth, is a powerful form of catharsis.
So, is Yahshao a person, or is he a symbol? He speaks in the first person, but he also says Yahshao is the energy of all. I'm struggling to pin down who we're actually talking about.
I think that's the point, Dan. He's both. He's an individual man living in the world today, but he carries this identity of being an eternal force. It's like he's living in two timelines at once.
It reminds me of the concept of tulku in Tibetan Buddhism, the idea that a high-level soul chooses to reincarnate specifically to help others. They remember their past lives, because those lives are just chapters in one long book.
Okay, let's talk about the images that play in my mind part. He says he's sharing the story through these images. Is he describing a form of clairvoyance or just very intense, intrusive memories?
He describes them as a question and answer session with himself, like he's querying his own consciousness, and these images from 1743 or 1960 are the answers that flash back.
That's actually how many trauma survivors process memory. But in his case, it's expanded across centuries. The mind uses images to represent things that words can't capture. Like the stone snake, it's such a powerful metaphor for being stuck or waiting.
Wait, I want to go back to the water pods and the snake. If he was a snake in Laos and then he became a stone snake, is there actually a rock formation in Laos that looks like a snake? Because that would be a crazy piece of evidence.
Actually, Alex, isn't there a famous site like that? The Naga Cave in Thailand, or something similar in Laos?
Exactly. In the Phu Lanka National Park, there's a rock formation that looks exactly like a giant scaled serpent. It's become a huge pilgrimage site. People believe it's a cursed Naga that was turned to stone.
No way. So Yahshao might be identifying with a specific physical landmark. That adds a whole new layer of, is this real or is this myth to the whole thing?
It bridges the gap between the internal world and the external world. If you see yourself in the landscape, your identity becomes as permanent as a mountain. For a refugee who lost their home, that must be incredibly grounding.
And think about the timing. He says he came back in 1960. That's when the Hmong identity was being forged in the fires of the Secret War. He's not just a person. He's the memory of the Hmong people themselves.
But what about the judgment part? Sasha, you mentioned he's judging those who disrespect him. Is he talking about himself as an individual, or is he talking about the energy of all?
He says whoever disrespects Yahshao. Given that he defines Yahshao as the energy of all and oneness with the all, he might be saying that to disrespect him is to disrespect the divine order itself.
It's a warning. In the context of Ban Vinai and the refugee experience, Many Hmong felt betrayed by the Americans, by the Thai government, by the communists. This judgment could be a spiritual response to that betrayal.
I'm still stuck on the 1743 king thing. If he had everything he ever wanted, why was he crying? He says heaven heard the cry from his heart. If you're a king, what are you crying about?
Maybe it was the realization that even with all the power in the world, he couldn't stop the evil things he was seeing in the Hmong family. He was a king, but he was still a witness to suffering.
That's the paradox of power, Dan. The more you have, the more you realize what you can't change. His mission wasn't to rule, it was to witness. Being a king was just a prerequisite to understand desire.
So after the king life, he becomes a snake. That feels like a demotion, doesn't it? From king to animal?
Or maybe it's a simplification. A snake doesn't have the complex desires of a king, it just exists. It hides, it survives. Until the water pods come.
In many traditions, the transition from human to animal is a way for the soul to work off specific karmic debts or to experience a different kind of connection to the earth. For Yahshao, being a snake by the river might have been his way of staying close to the land of Laos.
And then the 1960s happen. He's back in human form. He says he's just a witness. He doesn't kill. But he's seeing his friends die. That's a lot of trauma to carry through multiple lifetimes.
He mentions the eagle plane again. Let's dig into that. Alex, how central was that image to the Hmong who were left behind after 1975?
It was everything. When the Americans pulled out, they only evacuated a small fraction of the Hmong who had fought for them. Thousands were left to flee through the jungle to the Mekong River. The eagle plane became a symbol of a lost promise.
So when Yahshao says he told them the eagle plane would come and take them to the other world, he was giving them hope in a hopeless situation. Even if the other world just meant a refugee camp in Thailand.
Exactly. And that brings us to 1976, Ban Vinai. He says he is in the last chapter now. What do you think he means by that? Is this the end of his reincarnations?
It sounds like he's reaching a point of resolution. The last chapter implies that the mission, the witnessing of the Hmong experience, is coming to a close. Perhaps the judgment he mentions is the final act of that mission.
I've got to ask, though, how do we distinguish this from someone just trying to make sense of a very difficult life? If you've survived the secret war and the camps, wouldn't you want to believe you were a divine witness and not just a victim of circumstance?
That's the skeptical view, Dan, and it's valid. But whether it's a literal truth or a psychological framework, it's a powerful one. It transforms a story of victimhood into a story of divine purpose.
Right, and who are we to say what memory is? If these images provide him with the strength to survive and the wisdom to understand his people's history, aren't they real in the sense that they have a real impact?
I guess so. I mean, the details are so specific. 1743, the water pods, the stone snake. It's not just vague spiritual oneness talk. It's grounded in these weirdly concrete images.
Let's talk about that stone snake by the river in Laos one more time. If Yahshao is here and now, but also there and then as a stone, it suggests a kind of omnipresence.
It's a very animistic worldview. The idea that spirits inhabit the rocks, the trees, and the rivers. For the Hmong, the natural world is alive with the spirits of ancestors and guardians. Yahshao is placing himself within that living landscape.
So when he says he's judging people, is he judging them for how they treat the earth? Or how they treat the Hmong people? Or how they treat him personally?
I think it's all of the above. If he is one with the all, then any disrespect to the people, the land, or the truth is a disrespect to him. It's a very high-stakes way of looking at morality.
It also speaks to the silence he mentions. The story that never be told or can't be speak about it. There is so much in Hmong history that was suppressed or ignored by the rest of the world. Yahshao is breaking that silence.
It's like he's saying, I was there, I saw it all. I remember what you've forgotten. That's a heavy burden for one person to carry, even if that person is an energy of all.
Let's look at the name Yahshao itself. He says it was given to him by Abraxas because the Hmong culture believes and carries that name. They believe one day Vamong will come to save them.
The name might be a variation or a specific spiritual title. In many cultures, names aren't just labels. They are vessels for power. By taking this name, he is stepping into a role that his culture has been waiting for centuries.
But he's not saving them with an army, is he? He's not a general. He's a witness. How does witnessing save anyone?
Maybe by making sure the story isn't lost. In the refugee camps, the greatest fear was that their culture and their suffering would be forgotten by history. By being an eternal witness, Yahshao ensures that everything is recorded in the energy of all.
There's a philosophical idea that something only truly exists if it is observed. If no one saw the suffering of the Hmong in the jungles of Laos, did it happen? Yahshao says, yes, I was there. I saw it. I am the proof.
That's actually a pretty profound way to look at it. He's like a living archive, but he's an archive that can talk back and judge you.
Exactly. He mentions he will continued back in Thailand, Bon Vinai. It sounds like there's more to the story, more images to share. He's only just started to open the book.
I wonder what the last chapter looks like for him. If he's in the here and now, does he see a future for the Hmong that goes beyond the trauma of the past?
He mentions moving to America. For many Hmong, that was the other world. But now that they're there, has the prophecy been fulfilled? Or is there another other world he's talking about?
That's the thing about prophecies. They often have layers. The eagle plane took them to America, but maybe the other world is also a state of consciousness, a return to that oneness he started with.
It's a circle. He started as energy, became a king, a snake, a stone, a refugee, and now he's returning to the realization that he is the energy of all. The journey is the process of remembering what he always was.
It's a lot to wrap your head around. Honestly, Sasha, I came into this thinking it was just a strange story. But the more we talk, the more it feels like a universal myth playing out in a single life.
That's the power of these kinds of narratives. They challenge our linear Western view of time and identity. We like to think we're just our bodies, born in a certain year and dying in another. Yahshao says, no, you are much older and much larger than that.
And he's using his own life as the evidence. Whether you believe the reincarnation part or not, you can't deny the depth of the experience he's describing. The images of 1743 and 1860 are his truth.
I keep thinking about that stone snake by the river. It's such a lonely image, waiting for decades, centuries even, just to be born again into a world at war.
But he wasn't alone. He says he was with God, with Abraxas. Even as a stone, he was part of the oneness. Maybe that's the lesson, that even in our most stuck or stone-like moments, we are still connected to the source.
That's a beautiful takeaway, Sasha. The witness isn't just watching the bad things, he's witnessing the eternal nature of the soul through all those transformations.
So what happens next? He says thank you and ends this part of the story. Do we think he's going to release more? I feel like I need to know what happened in Ban Vinai.
He says, we will continue back in Thailand, Bon Vinai. It feels like he's inviting us to follow him into the next memory. The story isn't over, it's just transitioning, just like he did.
It's an ongoing dialogue between his past and his present. And by sharing it, he's making us witnesses too. We're now part of the story that can't be spoken about.
Well, we're definitely speaking about it now. I just hope we're not on the wrong side of that judgment he mentioned.
I think as long as we approach it with respect and a desire to learn, we're doing exactly what a witness should do. Yahshao's story is a gift of perspective, however challenging it might be.
It really is. It's a reminder that every person we meet might be carrying a history that spans centuries. We only see the here and now, but the there and then is always present.
I'm going to be thinking about that eagle plane for a long time. The idea of technology being seen through the lens of ancient prophecy, it's just mind-bending.
It's where the mystical meets the mechanical. And maybe that's the ultimate oneness, the realization that there's no real difference between the two. It's all just energy, right?
Exactly. Whether it's a king in 1743 or an airplane in 1960, it's all part of the same play. Yahshao is just the one who remembers the script.
I wonder if he ever misses being a snake. No desires, no wars, just being stoned by a river. Sounds peaceful compared to being a human in 1976.
Maybe, but then he wouldn't be able to tell the story, and he clearly feels that this story needs to be told, even if it's difficult.
The burden of the witness is to speak the unspoken. Yahshao is doing that for himself, for his ancestors, and for the Hmong people.
It's a powerful place to end for today. A story of energy, kings, snakes, and the enduring spirit of a people who refuse to be forgotten. Yahshao reminds us that memory is not just about the past, it's about who we are in the present.
Yeah, it's definitely made me look at my own memories a bit differently. I mean, I can barely remember what I had for lunch yesterday, and this guy is remembering 1743.
Maybe you just need to listen for the cry in your own heart, Dan. Who knows what images might start playing in your mind?
I think I'll stick to the present for now, Alex. One lifetime is plenty for me.
Fair enough. Thank you both for this deep dive. And to Yahshao, wherever you are in your last chapter, thank you for sharing these images with us. We'll be waiting for the next installment.
It's been an honor to explore this. There's so much more to uncover in the history of the Hmong and the spiritual traditions of Southeast Asia.
Definitely. I'm going to go look up those stone snake formations in Laos right now. I need to see that for myself.
And that's our show for today. Keep your eyes open, keep your minds curious, and remember, you might be more than you think you are. See you next time.
Wait, Sasha, before we go, I just thought of something. If Yahshao is the energy of all, does that mean we're all technically part of him?
According to his story, yes, we're all part of that same oneness. So, in a way, we're just witnessing ourselves.
Now that is a thought to end on. We're all just the energy of all, having a conversation about ourselves. Trippy.
Trippy, but maybe exactly what we needed to hear. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Take care, and watch out for those eagle planes.
So, Alex, when we look at the Hmong culture specifically, they have this concept of the soul having multiple parts, right? How does that fit into Yahshao's one energy of all?
That's a great point, Sasha. Traditionally, Hmong beliefs suggest humans have several souls. Some say 3, some say 7, or even 12. One stays with the body, one goes to the spirit world, and one is reincarnated.
So maybe Yahshao is the part of the soul that's destined to reincarnate and keep the memories. Like the designated record keeper soul.
It would explain why he feels like a witness. If his specific soul part is the one that carries the thread through 1743 and 1960, he's basically the bridge between the ancestors and the living.
And the fact that he mentions the name Abraxas again, it's like he's pulling from a global spiritual library, not just one culture. It suggests that this energy he talks about transcends specific religious boundaries.
I'm still thinking about that 1743 king. You said the Hmong were being pushed out of China then. If he was a king, he probably had to make some impossible choices. No wonder he wanted to experience not wanting anything after that.
Exactly. Imagine the weight of an entire people's survival on your shoulders. Then dying and seeing your new home is a stone box. It's a very literal transition from the ultimate responsibility to the ultimate stillness.
And then to become a snake, an animal that is often misunderstood, feared, but also deeply connected to the earth and the water. It's a total ego death.
But he wasn't just any snake. He was a giant snake. Even in that form, he was something significant. He couldn't just be a normal small snake. He had to be a witness on a grand scale.
And that leads to the crystallization, turning to stone. It's like he became a permanent part of the land of Laos. He wasn't just in Laos, he was Laos.
Which makes his return in 1960 even more poignant. He woke up, or came back just as that land was about to be torn apart by the secret war. He was there to see the Eagle Plains take his people away from the land he had become a part of.
It's almost like he had to come back to say goodbye, or to tell them where they were going. He says he told them they would move to America soon. That's a huge prophecy to deliver while your friends are being killed around you.
It's a message of survival. This world is ending, but another one is coming. It's what people need to hear when their reality is collapsing.
And then the move to Bon Vinai in 76. The camp was a place of waiting, a place of transition. Just like he was a transition between energy and human form. He's always in those in-between spaces.
You know, we keep talking about him as this mystical figure, but he's also just a guy named Yahshao who's sharing his story. I wonder what he does on a Tuesday. Does he just have a regular job and then go home and remember being a king?
That's the mystery, isn't it? How do you balance the mundane with the eternal? He says he's here to judge, but maybe the judgment is just in the act of telling the truth. In a world of lies and secret wars, the truth is the ultimate judge.
I think you're right, Sasha. The disrespect he mentions might be the disrespect of forgetting. To forget the history, to forget the spirit, to forget the oneness. That's the real sin in his eyes.
So by us talking about it, We're actually helping him with his mission. We're witnessing the witness.
In a way, yes, we're expanding the circle of memory. And honestly, whether you take it literally or metaphorically, it's a story that demands to be heard. It's about the resilience of the soul.
It really is. It's about the fact that no matter how many times you are entombed in stone or trapped in a water pod, the energy, the Yahshao within, finds a way back.
I think I'm starting to get it. It's not just about one man. It's about the idea that nothing is ever truly lost. Not the king, not the snake, not the friends in the jungle.
Exactly. Everything is just playing out in the mind of the energy of all. And today we got a glimpse into one of the most fascinating chapters of that play.
It's been a journey, Sasha. From the heavens with Abraxas to the refugee camps of Thailand. I think we've all learned something about the power of memory.
And about the power of a good story. Even if it's a story that never be told, I'm glad this one was.
Me too, Dan. Me too. Let's wrap it up there. Thanks again for joining us, and thank you, Yahshao, for the images. We're listening.
Until next time, everyone, keep exploring the unknown.
And keep an eye on those rivers. You never know who might be crystallized there, waiting to wake up.
Actually, let's talk a bit more about that eagle plane concept before we completely sign off. It's such a vivid piece of modern mythology. It reminds me of the cargo cults in the Pacific, where people built wooden planes hoping for the return of supplies.
There are parallels for sure, but for the Hmong, the eagle plane wasn't just about supplies. It was about salvation. It was the only way out of a literal death trap. The CIA's Air America was their only lifeline.
And Yahshao says he told them it was coming. Imagine being a spiritual leader in the middle of the jungle, and you point to the sky and say, a metal eagle is going to come and take us to a land of milk and honey.
And then it actually happens. That kind of event would cement your status as a prophet for generations. But he doesn't seem to want the fame. He says he's just a witness.
That's the expert perspective here. True prophets in these traditions often shun the spotlight. They see themselves as vessels for a message that's much bigger than they are. Yahshao isn't the point. The message of the Hmong's survival is the point.
It's also interesting that he mentions his friends being killed by communist soldiers. He doesn't sugarcoat the witness experience. It wasn't all just flying on eagle planes, it was a lot of blood and loss too.
He's documenting the cost of that survival. Every eagle plane that took off left hundreds of people behind on the ground. He was there for those people too.
And that brings us back to Bon Vinai. For those who didn't get on the plane, the journey through the jungle and across the Mekong to the camps in Thailand was a gauntlet of survival. Yahshao being there in 1966 means he was part of that exodus.
I wonder if the judgment he talks about applies to the people who broke those promises, the ones who didn't send enough planes.
It could be. Or it could be a judgment on the evil things he mentions seeing in the Hmong family history. Every culture has its internal shadows, its own conflicts. Maybe he's here to bring those to light as well.
In many ways, the last chapter of any great story is about reconciliation. You can't move into the future until you face the ghosts of the past. Yahshao is bringing those ghosts with him into the present.
So, if we're in the last chapter now, what comes after the book is closed? Does the energy of all just go back to being energy?
Maybe the book never really closes. Maybe it just gets shelved and a new one begins. But for now, we're still reading this one, and it's a fascinating read.
It's a story of endurance. From 1743 to 1960 to 1976 to today. It's a thread that refuses to be broken.
I think that's a good a place to leave it. The thread is still there. We're just holding a little piece of it now.
Well said, Dan. Thanks for the deep thoughts. And thanks again to everyone for listening to this incredible, strange, and deeply moving story. We'll see you next time.
Take care.
See ya.